So of course they experienced a rapid growth in GDP, in population, in lifestyles and consumption. What happened during that time was that the UAE jumped and leapfrogged across many countries, including the United States, and became the country with the largest ecological footprint in the world. And when the government caught wind of that, they responded by creating a federal initiative. They created the federal initiative comprised of partners, including government agencies, the ministry, the data initiative, WWF, and Global Footprint Network. One of the greatest achievements from that is before we started our ecological footprint work with the UAE government, they did not have a national statistics bureau. And when we began this initiative with them, they formally created a national statistics bureau for the UAE. And now, now that helps in more areas than just the ecological footprint. It really helps them to monitor other areas that, that require policy within the UAE. They also earmarked $15 billion of investment into alternative energy. $22 billion was invested to create Masdar, the Zero Waste, Zero Carbon Eco-City. They also created the innovative Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. And now we are currently working on them on scenario tools dealing with the challenges they face in the electricity sector. Ecuador is another good example of our work with national government. Until recently, Ecuador was always an ecological creditor, but from 2005 to 2006, they were about to cross the threshold from being an ecological creditor to a debtor. And what they did when they learned that that was going to happen was adopt the ecological footprint, and it became the first country to set a specific footprint target. And the goal was that by 2013, Ecuador's footprint would be within its biocapacity. So in other terms, they were going to live within their means by 2013. Part of that initiative was that in June 2007, the government of Ecuador embarked on the Yasuni ITT initiative. And that proposal consisted of forfeiting the extraction of more than 1 billion barrels of oil within the Amazon basin. They just ceased extraction of oil because they wanted to save their biocapacity and biodiversity in that region. So those are examples of national. We also work at the subnational level. Subnational analyses we find some countries are more interested in because rather than giving them a world average of biocapacity, we really hone in and are able to tell them exactly where the pressures are on different land types in those regions and what the human pressures are and what they can do to stop or reverse the trends. An example of this is the work that we did in Ontario. Recently, the Ontario Biodiversity Council released its biodiversity report. And it was comprised of 29 indicators that provide an overview of the province's natural environment and pressures on its biodiversity. And the ecological footprint was among those indicators. Japan, like I said, I was recently in Tokyo and I met with several ministries there, and they want to embark on a province calculator in Japan as well. And their thinking was that the different provinces in Japan are very unique in its biocapacity, and they wanted to capture that uniqueness and then in the end have a roundtable of all of those regional governments to find out how it looked as a country as a whole. Peru is another one that we're working on. The Philippines, I just came from a few days ago as well, and there's the Mindoro Island Sustainability Development Project that we're working on. City levels, we have done some city work, and we found that for cities, it's better because a lot of cities have a lot of policies already in place that do touch on reducing footprint without them even knowing that. So we like to use them as best models without them even realizing that that's what they've done. But also the decisions that are made at the city levels are the ones that last for generations and generations, which includes infrastructure, transportation. So for that reason, we like to work with cities. The city of Calgary was a good example. In 2005, we found that the city's footprint exceeded the Canadian average by more than 30%. So when they found this out, they halted all new development on green space for at least a year until they could incorporate the footprint into their development policy. It also became the first city in North America to power its public light rail system with 100% emissions-free wind-generated energy by 2012. They've also designed and adopted a number of programs to reduce their ecological demand. Producing reports on our own and with WWF is a big part of what we do. The Hong Kong Ecological Footprint Report came out in 2008, but we will be issuing a new one next month along with the Ecological Footprint Report of China. And I wanted to talk a little about food waste that was brought up by Gunther. When I was in Tokyo, I was there to release the Japan's Ecological Footprint Report, and food waste was a big part of that. And in fact, we were able to really dig down and look at what happened with that. I think it was around the 1980s, convenience stores became very popular in Japan. And they wanted to meet that growing appetite from the consumers, and rather than just produce convenience stores, they wanted to produce a real diversity of choices for these consumers to have. So they were producing, I think, 40% more food than what the consumers were really buying. So all of that would go to waste every day. And that was one of the things that we discussed with the government while we were there. Other city governments were working with Calgary, Quito, and San Francisco. Country clusters is something that is fairly new to us, and it's something that I'm trying to work on while I'm here in Asia. We have the Mediterranean Initiative. All Mediterranean nations except for Montenegro are running ecological deficits. So for that reason, we created the Mediterranean Initiative and are working with all the government leaders there to do analyses on the footprint for each of their countries. Asia Pacific Initiative is what we're currently working on as well, and some possible partners that we've been working with include the Philippines, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and then South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. We have not established contacts yet, but those are things that I'm hoping to do here. So if anyone's interested from those countries. The topic of trade came up. When we met with Japan, one of the big things that became clear was that Japan was increasingly importing a lot of food, and they were exporting to a point where they were depleting their resources. Japan was among the 10% countries with the highest fishing ground footprint, so they are in clear danger of collapsing their fisheries. And so part of the reason they wanted to become a participant in an Asia-Pacific collaboration was that they were trading with all these other Southeast Asian countries, and they wanted to know what each representative of each country could do to manage their resources well. And we saw in 2008 the rice shortage, what that does. So we sometimes are criticized for being anti-trade, but we're not anti-trade, but neither should countries continue to just keep importing and exporting without managing these resources and really understanding if they're depending on countries that may not be able to support their demands much longer. So Japan's key questions were, what is its ecological footprint? How does its footprint affect other countries in Asia? And how does the footprint of other Asian countries affect them? And so for such collaborations, we like to work with local governments and do local footprints and do roundtables with representatives from those countries. And then we like to work with partners such as WWF and other NGOs to really pull the stakeholders together. And then we like to get them in a group and then have conferences and roundtables such as these to discuss the findings and go through strategies. That's it. Thank you.
Now open for the dialogue. Oh, on my right hand side.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. One is, you did briefly mention about it, but one is on like production in a country which is which has probably its units in some other country and is for producing a certain product. So does that also get covered under such an exercise? So if a particular country has its production units in some other country, so does ecological footprint sort of, because it won't be the activities are not happening in that particular country, so does that get covered? That was one question. And the other is that do you periodically do these exercises that, you know, once in every 5 years you're doing, or as in when you feel the need? Is there any periodicity of conducting such an exercise?